The desert wind blew across the metal floor of Outpost 17, where a single human soldier named Riel sat alone, cleaning his weapon. He did not expect company, and he did not want it either. He had just finished a long patrol shift under two suns, and his skin burned despite the suit he wore. The outpost was silent, except for the buzzing of broken lights above. But then came a strange sound: metal footsteps. Not heavy like a human, not soft like a child. It was sharp like a warrior walking without fear. Riel stood quickly, and raised his gun ready to face danger. Again a tall shadow stepped into the doorway. Her armor shimmered dark red and gold. Her skin was pale silver, like moonlight, and her long white hair was tied in thick braids across her back. She had bright orange eyes that did not blink. Her voice came out low and smooth, like water over stone. She said, "You are the human soldier, Riel?" "Yes." Her voice was a mix of command and confusion. "I was told to meet you here. My name is Zura. I am the one assigned to you." Riel lowered his weapon but kept his eyes sharp. He had heard stories of alien mercenaries. Zura was one of the best. They said she had fought in 7 wars and never lost, but she worked for money, not loyalty, and now, somehow, command had paired her with him for this scouting mission. He felt anger and confusion rise inside him, but said nothing. He watched her as she walked into the room and stood straight like a statue, but her eyes flicked to him often, as if unsure whether to trust or fight. Zura looked around the room: one small bed, a table, 2 chairs, a storage locker, and one cooling fan that worked only sometimes. She clicked her tongue and removed her heavy rifle, placing it on the table without asking. She said, "This room is small and hot. I need to clean up and change armor. I do not like wearing this in rest time." She started pulling at the armor clips on her shoulders and chest slowly with practiced hands, but then she looked up at him and narrowed her eyes sharply. "No peeking, human," she said. Her cheeks flushed faint pink. Riel looked away fast. He turned his back and raised his hands, as if to prove innocence. He heard the soft sound of armor pieces being placed on the floor, one by one. Her boots thumped next, then silence filled the room, and his heart started beating louder than before. He thought about how close she stood behind him, and how strange this all was. Yesterday he was alone. Today he was sharing a room with an alien warrior, who just blushed and warned him not to look. The silence broke when Zura spoke again. "You have a scar on your back." Her voice was softer now, more curious than cold. He said, "Yes, sniper shot 2 years ago. Lucky to be alive." She hummed lightly and said, "Most humans would not survive that, but you did. That is good." She paused, then added, "I have 3 scars, one on my leg from plasma, one across my ribs from a knife, and one on my neck from my own sister." Long story. Riel did not know what to say, so he just nodded. Though she could not see it, she kept speaking quietly, as if thinking out loud. "Humans smell different from us. Not bad, just different, like fire and soil and old blood." Her voice carried no insult, only observation. He said, "You talk a lot for someone who doesn't trust me." She replied quickly, "I never said I do not trust you. I just do not want you to see me without armor." He almost laughed, but stopped himself. He knew the line between respect and insult was thin when it came to warriors like her, but the air between them had changed. Somehow it was not war, not peace, not even friendship, just something new, something rofter. A while Zura said, "I am dressed now. You may turn." He did, and saw her standing in different armor, lighter, more flexible, meant for sleep or casual time. It hugged her form, but was still modest. Her face was calm, but her eyes watched him like a hawk. She said, "We leave at first light, and I do not like delays. I hope you are ready." Riel said, "Always." She nodded once, and moved to the bed, claiming it without question. He took the floor without complaint, and lay down on the hard surface as the fan turned slowly above them. Sleep came slow and full of thoughts, but both stayed silent under the same roof. Two warriors from 2 worlds beginning something neither of them fully understood. The suns had not yet risen when Zura opened her eyes, her breath calm, her body still, but her mind sharp. She had already dressed before the human even moved from the floor. Her hands moved fast, checking each part of her armor like a ritual from her world. Then she turned and looked at the human, his arm across his chest, his mouth half open, his sleep deep, and unaware of her watching. She moved closer and nudged his shoulder with her foot. "Time to go, human," she said, without raising her voice. He blinked, sat up slowly, rubbed his eyes, and nodded. Without a word he stood and grabbed his rifle. He checked the power level, his hands moving like muscle memory, but his eyes kept glancing at her. His mind replayed the night and the strange peace they had shared without words outside the outpost. The sky was orange, and red clouds stretched across the sky like scars in the air. Dust rolled over the land, and heat shimmered from the rocks ahead. They had one mission: to scout the abandoned mining ruins near the canyon. Something had triggered alarms there last week. 3 patrols had gone missing since then. Riel walked ahead, scanning the area through his visor. Zura walked behind him, silent but alert. Her steps made no sound. Despite the heavy armor, her fingers rested near the grip of her weapon. Her eyes scanned the cliffs and sky. Her body moved like a predator, always ready. Suddenly, the scanner beeped once a week, signaled from the ruins, then static. Reel stopped, raised his hand and dropped lows. Zura followed instantly, crouching behind a large rock. He said, "I got something, but it vanished," she replied. "Maybe heat, or a glitch, or maybe not a glitch at all." They moved again, slow and careful, their boots sinking into ash and dry soil. The ruins rose ahead like bones of a dead giant, broken towers, and rusted machines. The wind howled through the metal like voices crying out from deep inside the ground as they entered. The first structure, a door, fell from its hinges with a loud crack and echoed through the hollow place. They paused, weapons ready. Nothing moved. The silence returned like a thick blanket, and Zura whispered, "I do not like this place." They moved through dark hallways, light flickering above them, walls cracked and scorched, bullet holes and claw marks covered every surface. Then they saw the first body, or what was left of it, burned, twisted, barely human. Reel clenched his jaw and stepped forward, scanning for ID. No tag, no weapon, nothing left. Zura looked up and said, "This was not a normal attack. Too fast, too strong. Whatever did this was not interested in loot, only blood." Reel nodded and kept walking, his steps faster. Now he hated these ruins more. With every breath in the next room, they found signs of a fight, broken gear, blood splatter, and strange markings on the walls, like symbols scratched by claws. Zura stepped closer and whispered, "This is not written by any race I know, and I have seen many." Reel took a photo with his scanner and said, "We send this back once we clear the signal." Tower. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed, metal scraping across stone, not close, but not far either. Both turned, weapons raised, their backs to each other, eyes searching. Then silence again. Reel said, "Maybe wind." Zura said, "Maybe not." They pushed forward, reaching the heart of the ruins, where the signal tower still stood, half broken, but blinking faintly. Reel moved to it, started the reboot process. Wires sparked under his hands and he cursed under his breath. Zura circled the area, guarding him, her grip tight on the weapon, her eyes darting through every shadow. Then came the roar, not human, not machine, not natural. It shook the ground and made the tower hum. Reel shouted, "Almost done, cover me." Zura shouted back, "Already doing it." From the darkness came the beast, tall, thin, with too many limbs, its skin black and wet, its mouth full of blades. It leaped toward Zura with speed like lightning. She rolled left, fired 3 shots, 1 hit to missed it, screamed in pain, and turned to Reel. Reel dropped the tool, grabbed his rifle, and fired straight into its chest. But it did not stop. It rammed him and sent him flying across the floor. Zura screamed and charged. She slammed her blade deep into its side and pulled upward. The beast howled and turned on her, claws flashing through the air. Blood splashed across the floor. Not hers, not his, but the beast's. Reel rose, groaning, and aimed at its back. Zura shouted, "Do it now," and he fired again. This time through the skull. It dropped, shaking once, then died. Silence returned, but the air still burned with heat and blood. Reel walked to her, limping slightly. She had a cut on her side armor. "Cracked," he said. "You good?" She nodded, barely. They stood together among ruins and bodies. The tower beeped, signal restored. Zura looked at him and said, "Next time you cover a fix." He smiled and said, "Deal." The wind howled above the broken towers, but below the ruins, silence wrapped around them like cold metal. After the beast fell and the signal came back, Zura sat on a rock, her blade red with blood, her side bleeding, but her face calm. Reel stood next to her, scanning the tower again, checking if more signals came through, but the tower gave only one message, a strange transmission full of whispers and noise. Zura tilted her head, listening, eyes narrowed. She said, "This voice is not human, and not from my world either." Rio raised his volume filter and slowed the audio. The words twisted, but something repeated over and over. "Help us, help us, help." Hughes looked at her and said, "It could be survivors," she said, "or a trap." They moved deeper through the ruins, down a spiral stairwell, barely holding together. Each step creaked and echoed like warning drums from a tribe long forgotten. The walls were damp, the smell was thick with rust and burned oil. At the base of the stairs, a wide chamber opened, full of old mining equipment, broken power lines, and strange lights floating in the air. Blue orbs that blinked like they were watching. Zura aimed her weapon at one, but it floated back into the dark and vanished. Reel whispered, "This place feels wrong, like it remembers pain." She replied, "Some places do." Suddenly, a screen on the far wall flickered and showed a symbol, not military, not mining. It looked like a hand made of fire wrapped in chains. Reel stared at it, confused, but Zura took a step back, her voice low. "This is a forbidden sign from the border planets. It means sealed by order of death before He could ask more. The ground beneath them shook, dust fell from above, and the chamber doors slammed shut behind them. A new path opened in the floor. A metal hatch sliding away, slowly revealing stairs that led even deeper. Zura looked at him and said, "You first." This time he smirked, but nodded, and started down the stairs, took them to an ancient lab, long-forgotten metal beds with straps. Machines covered in dust and dried blood, writing on the walls in alien language, some crossed out, some smeared. Zura walked through the room, eyes alert, voice flat. This place was for testing, not healing. Real touched one machine. It still worked. Screens showed faces. Some human, some not. Notes under them, all said terminated. Then they heard breathing, soft, slow. Not theirs, it came from the far end behind a steel door, marked with one word, alive. They readied weapons and opened the door. Inside was a small figure sitting in the dark. Her arms tied, her body thin and pale, her eyes glowing dim green. She looked young, but her skin was cracked like old stone. She raised her head and whispered, "Help." Real stepped forward, but Zura held him back. She scanned the room, then spoke, "What are you, and what is your name?" The girl said, "Name is Lyra. I was taken, I was used. Now I wait to die, please, no more." Pansura looked at her and then at Real. Something passed between them, not spoken, but clear. They both knew pain. They both knew the feeling of being used. Real said, "We can help you, but first tell us what happened." Here Lyra nodded slowly, and said, "The scientists tried to create weapons, mixed from many races. They took children, gave them strength, gave them hunger, but something went wrong. The last one escaped. It killed them all. I hid. I am not like him." The lights blinked red, and a loud alarm filled the room. Lyra screamed, "He is coming. He knows you are here. He hears everything." Zura pulled her close and said, "Run now." They grabbed Lyra and moved back through the lab, dodging sparks as the machines came to life again. One screen flashed the message, "Subject awake, subject unstable." Behind them a wall exploded, and from the smoke came another figure, tall, wide, with 4 arms and no face, only a glowing mouth full of sharp teeth. His voice was inside their heads, not from his mouth. He said, "You should not have come." Zura fired first. Real followed. Lyra screamed and ducked behind them. The monster moved fast, bending metal, with his hands crushing the wall with each step. They led him through the lab, down another hallway, forcing doors to shut behind them. In seconds, not safety. Zura handed Lyra to Real and turned. She faced the monster alone, her blade drawn, her voice steady. "You want blood? Then take mine." She charged him, screaming like a storm of fire and steel. Real looked back once, saw her clash with the monster, and then the door closed. He ran with Lyra through darkness, hoping she would survive. The hallway lights blinked fast. Red and white alarms echoed through the steel walls as Real carried Lyra in his arms, her breath weak, her skin cold. His mind ran wild with fear, not for himself but for Zura. She had stayed behind to fight the creature alone, and he did not hear her scream, which scared him even more, because silence from a warrior like her could only mean one thing. He turned a corner and kicked open a low door, sliding inside a dark chamber filled with broken screens and shattered glass. He locked the door behind him, placed Lyra on a table, and scanned the room, his rifle ready, his hands shaking slightly. Lyra opened her eyes, her voice cracked. She said, "Why did she stay? She could have left too." Real answered, "Because that is what she does. She does not run, not when others need time to escape." The room buzzed with strange static. Blue sparks danced across the walls, and one screen near the center blinked on by itself. Text scrolled across it, "Warning, memory core breach." Real looked at it and stepped closer, then stopped when he saw what was on the screen. Face, her image recorded from a file dated 5 years ago. Lyra sat up, weak but alert, her eyes wide. She whispered, "They knew her. They knew her before this mission." Real touched the screen and videos started to play. Zura stood in a dark room, her hands chained, her voice calm. As she answered questions from behind the camera, she said, "Name Zura, race hybrid, mix of Trelkin and human. Blood status, former assassin, now rogue. Purpose, refused to kill civilians under contract." The voice behind the camera asked, "Do you feel guilt?" She answered, "No, I feel something worse. I feel memory." Real stepped back in shock, his mind filled with questions. She was once used by the same people who made this place. She was one of them, maybe even before it all burned. Another video started, this time showing a younger Lyra screaming as machines injected her skin, glowing veins lighting up. She called out for help, for mother, for someone. Lyra covered her face and said, "I remember that day. It was the day I stopped being a girl and became a mistake." The room started to shake again, dust falling from the ceiling, and the screen cracked with heat. Real grabbed Lyra and turned to the next hallway. The wall burst open, and flames rolled in, but from the fire came a figure, crawling, dragging one leg. Burned armor melted. It was Zura. Her face was cut, her hands bruised, but her eyes were sharp. She pointed her blade at the smoke behind her, and said, "Move." Now he is not dead, just slowed. They helped her up, and the 3 moved through the collapsing halls deeper toward the only path left, a door marked Core in faded paint. The door opened with a long groan and revealed a chamber filled with liquid tanks. Glowing with red lights, bodies floated inside, some human, some alien, some unrecognizable. Zura limped forward, her breath slow. She pointed to the center, where a machine pulsed with light and wires like veins. She said, "This is the source, the power that runs him, the one you saw, the one without a face. Destroy this, and we end him." Rel pulled his last charge pack from his belt and walked to the core. He said, "This will overload the system, but we need a minute to escape." Zura nodded and turned to Lyra. She placed a small round device in her hand and said, "Press this when I say, not before, not after." Suddenly the floor cracked and the monster rose from below. Its body burned, but healing fast, its arms opening wide, voice echoing through their skulls, saying, "You three cannot stop what was born from pain." Real shouted, "Now," and Lyra pressed the device. The core screamed, a light burst filled the room, and the monster let out a roar of rage. Zura grabbed them both and ran back through the tunnel. The walls shook, the air turned thick with smoke and sound. They reached a lift at the end and jumped inside as the ground behind them exploded. The lift shot upward, fast metal screeching and sparks flying as they rose toward the surface. Then silence. The door opened to morning light, the sun's rising over the red hills. They had made it out, but behind them the ruins still whispered. The voices, not yet gone, covered their clothes as the three stepped out from the ruins. Their bodies worn, their lungs filled with smoke, and their minds heavy with memories. None of them spoke at first. Real stared at the horizon where the twin suns were rising slowly over the red land. Zora leaned against a broken post, her shoulder bleeding again, her armor cracked, her eyes half closed, but sharp as always. Lyra sat quietly between them, staring at her own hands like she was afraid of what they might still become. The air was calm for a moment. Birds circled above, smoke faded behind them, and the wind no longer screamed. But that peace did not last. A sound came from the sky, a soft hum growing louder. It was not thunder, it was not wind, it was a ship. Zura turned her head and said, "That is a bounty drop pod, not military, not rescue, and not friendly." Real looked at her, confused. "A bounty? Who placed a bounty?" Zura looked down, voice cold. "The ones who made the lab, they must know. I survived." The pod slammed into the ground near them, kicking up dust, and fire metal claws unfolded. And from inside stepped three figures, armored, tall, no faces visible. Their suits black, with a red mark across the chest, the same firehand symbol from the lab. One of them spoke in a voice like ice, "The bounty is alive. Capture, not kill. Reward doubles if the human is brought back to Real." Raised his rifle. Zira stepped forward, her blade humming. Lyra backed up, fast hands glowing faint green. Spra said, "I will not go back, and if you try to take me, you will leave here without your arms." The bounty hunters moved fast like shadows. They had trained for this kind of target. One charged at Real, another rushed. Lyra, the third, came for Zura. Real fired twice and hit the chest plate of the one charging him, but the figure did not slow it, slammed into him, and knocked him down, gun flying out of reach. Real rolled and grabbed a sharp rock, jamming it into the joint of the suit. Sparks flew and the figure screamed. Lyra held her ground, her fingers raised. A wave of energy burst from her palm and threw the attacker against a rock wall, breaking part of the helmet. The figure crawled away, eyes wide from behind the mask. Afraid, Zira met the last hunter blade, two blade sparks flying with each strike. Her movements were sharp like lightning, but her wound slowed her. She ducked one blow, rolled and stabbed up her blade, piercing through the enemy's ribs. The body fell still, but more ships were coming in the distance. Black dots against the sky. Real said, "We cannot fight an army, not now, not like this." Looked at him, her face unreadable. She said, "Then we run, but we run smart." She grabbed the bounty tag from the dead enemy, placed it into her wristband, and hacked a signal. It blinked red, then green. Location scrambled. They ran into the cliffs, moving fast and silent between rocks and dry rivers. They found a cave behind a wall of vines, old, forgotten, maybe untouched since the last war inside. The air was cool, the ground dry, the light dim. They sat again, breathless. Zora leaned back and closed her eyes. She said, "The bounty was once just for me. Now they want all of us. We touched the wrong place, found the wrong truth. They want silence. We are the noise." Real touched her arm gently the first time without fear. He said, "I do not care about your past, not anymore. But if we keep running, we need a plan, not just luck." Lyra looked up, her eyes calm now. She said, "I can help. I remember codes, access points from the lab, maybe even control hubs. I was not just a test subject, I was part of the network." Smiled for the first time, not wide, not long, just a flicker, but it was real. She said, "Then we fight back, not with numbers, not with fire, with truth. We break the lie that built that lab. We bring it down, not for revenge, but so no more girls like Lyra are ever made on outside. More ships flew by, but none found them. Cave waited silent, holding 3 souls marked by pain, now burning with purpose. Cave stayed dark, but safe for now. No signal passed through the thick rock, no drone flew above. No enemy watched them breathe. Real lit a small lantern, the yellow light cast long shadows on the walls. Zura sat by the cave mouth, blade resting on her lap, her eyes never left the outside. Lyra knelt near the center, drawing lines in the dirt, with her finger each marked strange and curved symbols that seemed to wake something in the air. Real walked over and asked softly, "What are you drawing?" Lyra did not look up. She whispered, "I am remembering. They erased my memories, but some things return. When I sleep, when I close my eyes and hear the walls whisper, this is part of the map. A hidden vault deep below the first lab. I think there is something there, something they were scared to use." Zura turned her head sharply. "Vaults are rare, hidden. One's even more rare. What kind of weapon would they fear more than what we already saw?" Lyra stood and pointed to a place on the map not far from the ruins. Where they fought, it was marked with a circle made of broken arrows. She said they called it Project Full Voice. I only heard the name once before the pain took over, but I think it was something old, something not built, but found real. Looked at Zura, her face frozen like a statue. He asked, "Do you know that name?" Zura stood slowly, her voice quiet like wind before a storm. "I was told that story when I was a child in training. We thought it was a myth, something about a voice so strong, it could tear ships from the sky. Crackbone without touch, bend wills without words." Lyra nodded her hand, now shaking slightly. The files in the core said the vault could only be opened by someone with human and alien blood. Someone like her. Silence filled the cave for a long moment. Then Real said, "Then we go." They packed fast, climbed down the cliff under night sky, stars watching like cold eyes above it. Took 2 days through the wasteland, hiding from scouts, avoiding sensor fields, sleeping inside broken shells of long-dead machines. The land was harsh, but they moved like ghosts. When they reached the marked place, it looked like nothing, just stone hills and dry sand, but Lyra walked forward. Arms out, eyes closed, she whispered to the wind, and the ground shook. A circle of metal rose from the earth, dust flying, gears grinding, and a door opened wide enough for one. They stepped in one at a time, the tunnel inside glowing with soft blue lights, smooth walls, no seams, no rust, not like the labs this place was. Old, truly ancient. Lyra walked ahead, no fear in her step. She said, "I feel it calling, not with words, but with something deeper, like a sound only my bones can hear deeper." They went until they reached a chamber wide and round. The walls pulsed like veins, and in the center floated a sphere, silver and black, spinning slowly in the air. Zura froze, her hands clenched. She said, "This is not tech from our side. This is precursor level, maybe older, maybe something not meant for US. Real stepped forward, drawn to the sphere, but Lyra placed a hand on his chest and said, "No, it must choose not be taken." She stepped close, held out her hands, and the sphere stopped spinning. A hum filled the chamber, deep, low like thunder under ocean. It began to shift, pulling into a shape, something like armor, something like fire, something not fully real. The shape wrapped around Lyra, like wind, not touching but glowing. Her eyes turned full green, her hair lifted. Her voice came out in layers, as if many spoke at once. She said, "I remember now. They made me to hold this. They made me to be a key, but they failed to understand. I was not just a lock, I was a Nenzura." Stared at her, not with fear but awe. She whispered, "She is not a weapon, she is a message." The lights dimmed, then flared. The ground shook. A pulse fired from the vault into the sky, a signal clear and loud. Real said, "What did we just wake?" Lyra turned to them, her eyes still glowing. She said, "Not death, not life, something else, something waiting for a long time." Above, ships turned, sensors screamed, alarms lit across enemy systems. Something ancient had spoken again, and someone would come to silence it. The sky cracked open as ships appeared above, black triangles blotting out the sun, engines burning like angry stars. Each one carried soldiers, not of one race, but many hired hands, bound by fear, not loyalty, all sent to destroy what had awakened below the sand inside the vault. Lyra stood still, glowing, her feet not touching the floor. Her voice had stopped, but the air still hummed like the echo of a song sung without words. Zura watched with her blade lowered, her breath slow, her mind racing. She had seen weapons rise, but never like this, never quiet, never kind. Real stood between them and the exit, his rifle ready but useless against what was coming. The vault was not a fortress, it was a door, and now it had opened. Lyra turned to them, her glow dimming, her face young again but changed. Something in her eyes, old and clear. She said, "I remember more." Now they called it the voice core, not a weapon, not a machine. It was a warning. It sings to those who listen. It tells them truth, and truth breaks the chains of controls. Rua stepped forward, the ground trembling under her feet. "If the enemy hears that, Song they lose the lie that binds them, they lose control of their army. Riel asked, then why silence it, why not use it? Lyra looked down, her voice soft, because truth hurts, and the ones in power fear pain more than death. Above the enemy landed ships, spread across the hills metal beasts unfolding cannons. Turning scouts, running toward the vault. Zura walked out first, the light behind her, turning her shadow long and sharp. She raised her blade and called to them, her voice loud, I am Zura of Note. Clan once assassin, now protector. You come for a child, but you face me. They opened fire, but the ground shook, and the bullets bent. Wind screamed and knocked them down. Lyra stepped forward, her arms lifted, not in anger, not in rage, but in peace. Voice rose, not loud, not harsh, just steady. She sang one word, one note, and the sky changed. The soldiers dropped their weapons, eyes wide, hands over ears, not in pain, but in memory. One by one they saw what they were, who they were, what they had done. Screamed, some wept, some ran. Only one stood firm. The commander, a tall being with gold armor and no eyes. Just a voice full of hate. He shouted, shut it down, erase the song, kill the girl. He raised his staff, lightning danced across the sky, aimed at her heart, but Zura moved like wind and fire. She leaped, caught the strike with her blade, grounded it into the sand. Smoke rose from her feet, but she did not fall. She charged and struck him down, her blade cutting the staff in two. He tried to rise, but Riel stood over him, gun aimed, hands steady. He said, you came for silence, but left with the sound of your failure. The enemy fled, ships lifting one by one, sky clearing. Only broken weapons and quiet feet remained. Lyra dropped to the ground, her glow gone, her breath slow. She looked up and smiled a little. I am Zura. Walked to her, knelt, and placed a hand on her shoulder. You were never a weapon. They were just afraid of your voice. Riel sat beside them, dirt on his face, sweat in his eyes, but peace in his heart. The vault behind them closed, not sealed, not lost, just resting, waiting for the next voice. Later they sat on the cliff edge, watching the sunset, the sky full of soft colors, the kind that do not burn, the kind that stay in memory. Zura leaned back, her hair undone, her armor cracked, but her heart calm for once. Riel asked, what now? She smiled, without showing teeth. She said, now we live. Lyra picked up a stone and whispered, I think the stars are listening. Now no alarms, no orders, no the truth, and those brave enough to speak it